Hey guys, what's up and welcome back to my channel. I'm just gonna say it now. Anytime I sit down to film, my neighbors decide that this is the exact moment that they are going to begin screaming or their child is gonna have a tantrum. So I'm sorry, I'm very frustrated about it myself right now. So today's topic is a lot, so prepare yourself for what we're about to get into. It's not lighthearted.
Bitch, when is it ever?
This is an article from the Daily Mail. Now, normally I avoid the Daily Mail like the plague just because it's not my favorite source to get accurate information from. However, this was one of the only sources that had an exclusive interview. Every other article I've seen so far literally almost is identical to the Daily Mail one because the Daily Mail is the only one who really has any information. Former cult member tells how she ran away from her father's incestuous polygamous sect at 17 to escape marrying her cousin and pumping out dozens of children to be with her true love. I don't think there are many titles that genuinely shock me as much as this one did. I was like, what the fuck? It's like every extra word you read is a new stroke. Teenager Mary Jacobs was under orders to marry her cousin and live the rest of her life pumping out a dozen or more children in a polygamous secretive cult known as the Order. Instead, she is now happy, married to the love of her life, and has two beautiful children. Alright, so it starts dark, but at least we know that there's a happy ending, contrary to most things that we discuss on this channel. Also, can I just say, I don't like the term pumping out children. Like, it just physically makes me feel uncomfortable. Like, it just sounds disgusting. There's nothing wrong with having children, but pumping out. Also, the cult known as the Order, for some reason, the fact that it's called the Order really scares me. Cults generally already scare me, but when they have these type of official names, I just feel 5 times more intimidated. Mary knew she had one chance for escape. The then 17-year-old had to make an early morning bolt from the home where she lived with her mother and 15 siblings and run a quarter of a mile across a public park where her boyfriend and his parents would be waiting for her.
They later clear up that her boyfriend is not part of the cult and met her elsewhere, just so you know.
Anything could go wrong. She hadn't eaten or even drunk water for days as punishment, but the price of failure was too much to consider. If she didn't succeed within days, she would have to commit to marry her cousin as soon as she turned 18. The concept of marrying your cousin in and of itself is creepy as fuck, but what creeps me out more is this thing of as soon as you turn 18, like they're just waiting for you to turn 18 to be like, all right, marry your cousin, have 500 children, let's get your cousin another wife after you so she can have another billion children to populate our cult. Mary had finally made it to the outside world, away from the Order, a highly secretive polygamous cult on the very fringes of Mormonism. She knew her parents and their powerful relatives would soon be reaching out for her, but at last she had hope. For the next 5 months, she would hide in a rented room in Las Vegas before finally she turned 18 and could be her own woman, away from people who tried to control her every move from the day she was born. She did marry on her 18th birthday, but it was to the man she loved, the man who had orchestrated the escape. Now, nearly 6 years later, they are the parents of 2 adorable boys living just a few miles away from the suffocating strictures of the cult. First of all, props to the boyfriend for helping her get away, because that's no small thing that he did. Second of all, why are they living close? I would want to live on another continent, probably, if I'd escaped from a cult. Like, I get that still it's her family, but at the same time, if your family's trying to make you marry your cousin and control you in that type of way, I think cutting them off is okay. Now, this is one part that really creeped me out. My whole life was controlled by the Order. They have their own elementary school, they have their own stores, they have their own bank, everything is enclosed. They decide where you work, they decide what you go to school for, they decide who you marry, everything is decided for you. The idea of a cult having their own school and their own bank scares me mainly because it feels like it's its own country with its own ruling, and I feel like if you're inside that, it's even scarier. I feel like that makes it scarier because you have way less contact with the outside world and it feels like you're trapped in a jail, like it's like the mini country jail. So Mary was actually supposed to end up working at the Order's internal bank. Obviously that didn't happen, but she was going to school for that. What I think is interesting to discuss is what exactly is the Order, which I think is the main question on people's minds, like what is this group? The Order has its roots in the Great Depression of the 1920s when Mary Nelson's great-great-grandfather Charles Kingston broke with the Mormon Church over the question of polygamy. Kingston claimed he was following the word of Mormon founder Joseph Smith, a firm believer in plural marriage. His son, Eldon Kingston, founded the Davis County Cooperative Society, which over the years morphed into the Latter-day Church of Christ, or LDCC, and the Order. Eldon was followed by his son, John and John's son Paul Kingston, now 59, took over the reins in 1987. Beneath Paul are 6 of his brothers, including Mary's father, David, who are the pillars of the church. Below them are numbered men who are each assigned a number in the order they will enter heaven. That's weird, a number for the order that you'll enter heaven. I've not heard of that one before. Because the group's leaders often have dozens of wives who each have had up to 20 children, the order has grown massively over 90 years.
Oh, tell me, what do you want to be when you grow up?
I want to be married and have 100 kids so I can have 100 friends and no one can say no to being my friend.
But men who are not so closely related to the leaders get the short end of the stick. Many never marry because there's simply not enough women to go around, as the leaders have so many wives. Unlike many other fundamentalist sects, members of the LDCC do not stand out. They hide in plain sight, said Brian Nelson. They wear modern clothes and use computers, cell phones, and other modern conveniences. They attend college to get the education necessary to work in the 300 or so companies run by the order. 300? What the fuck? I don't know. Like, it just shocks me that it's this big of an operation. I genuinely did not expect it to be that big of an operation. Over the years, accusations of child marriage and abuse against leaders has been widespread. Mary's father was found to be married to a 15-year-old when she ran naked from a house to a public phone box and dialed 911. The girl's father beat her so severely for trying to escape that she passed out after counting 28 lashes. Holy shit. Now the order is facing its stiffest test with the trial of Jacob and Isaiah Kingston for defrauding the government. Back in the early 1900s, the government prosecuted polygamists, so Mormon church leaders developed a philosophy of screw the government because it is persecuting us. That persists today. They have the ethos of bleed the beast when it comes to the government. They believe they are justified in taking its money. So later on in the article, they explain that Mary met her boyfriend in college where she was studying so then she could work at the bank in the order. However, at first she wasn't entirely honest, which I can't really blame her for because I feel like you'd be judged really fast about that, even if it's not really in your control, like what family you're born into. The boyfriend, Brian, really just thought that she had like very controlling parents, a very controlling family, and you know, I mean, obviously that was true, but he didn't know the extent to which that was true. They have a lot about how they met and everything, but honestly I don't think it's all that interesting to know all the details of how they got together considering the severity of the actual cult and the order, but I'll link it down below if you want to read it. Apparently Mary didn't even know who her father was until she was 13, and he suddenly told her and her siblings to start calling him Dad and not Uncle David, which I think is really weird. Like, I mean, I'm sure there are weird reasons why you would hide that, but I found that very strange. I mean, I guess because it's hard to explain why you have multiple wives, but at the same time, if you're into polygamy and you're kind of making that the rule, surely you have to find a way to tell your children, right? At one point, Mary's brother saw her texting Brian, and he told the mom who told the dad, and Mary said, "My dad put me on a 3-day fast, no food or water, to charge my spiritual batteries and get in line with what Heavenly Father wants. He told me my goal was to be engaged by the end of 2 weeks to David Kingston, my cousin. I had to sleep in my mom's bed and she held my hand at night so she would know I was there and couldn't go anywhere without her. She even had to use a restroom with no door so she could be constantly watched. At work, she was assigned a computer with no internet access. She wrote Brian a letter saying her goodbyes because she was having to marry someone else and secretly transferred it to another computer and sent it. I had to be really quick on that," she said. That is when Brian knew he had to help. He got a message to her that he would hide a phone under a car in Mary's driveway so they could stay in sporadic contact. So then, as we already know, she managed to escape and they went to Las Vegas. They chose Vegas because Nevada has lax rule about teenage runaways. If they had stayed in Utah, Mary's parents would have had a good chance of forcing her to return home. If that had happened, Mary believes she would have been placed in detention under the pretense that she had drug or alcohol problems. She stayed in Vegas for 5 months until November 19th, her birthday. Then she finally returned to Utah for a courthouse marriage to the man who had got her out. In court papers, Mary's mother has previously said she worried about the 9-year age gap between Brian and Mary and said her daughter had told her she started having sex with Brian when she was 16. Brian insisted to dailymail.com that they waited until they were married. So wait, they met in university, but apparently she was 16, unless she finished school when she was really young, which is possible because if they have their own school or their own high school system, they could easily manipulate it to make people finish earlier, get into university earlier, because of course then you need to get married when you're 18 and then pump out children, right? So that's interesting. I didn't know about the 9-year age gap, and I think it's interesting that they wait until towards the end of the article to just casually mention like, oh yeah, she wasn't 18 yet and he was 26, 25 or 26. I don't know how I feel about that one. Like, I'm glad he got her out, but at the same time, I'm like, wouldn't it be easy to manipulate someone after you help them get out from something to be like, oh, I helped you do this, so you have to do XYZ? I don't know. I don't want to assume anything, but just interesting.
Do not diddle kids. It's no good diddling kids.
There is no quicker way for people to think that you are diddling kids than by writing a song about it.
Now Mary has no contact with any member of her family. Some have tried to reach out to her to find out how they too could escape, but after brief conversations, the line of communication have gone cold. She says she still loves her mother. I know she's brainwashed. She was born into the same situation that I was. That's so sad. Can you imagine that your family reaches out to you? And of course, I'm sure they want to know how she's doing and everything, but they're reaching out specifically to find out, hey, how can we get the fuck out of here too? That's so sad. Anyway, this article is really long and continues for quite a while, but one last piece of this story is that Mary is going to be the star witness in a $511 million fraud trial of her cousins. 4 members of Mary's family are due to go on trial in July on charges of attempting to defraud the government of more than $1 billion by falsely claiming tax credits for their biofuel company. The case surrounds their company, Washakie Renewable Energy, which allegedly claimed it produced millions of gallons of biofuel over a 6-year period, when it produced a tiny fraction of that amount. The government claims Washakie then forged paperwork saying it sold onto other companies controlled by the order and claimed a $1 a gallon government tax credit. Court papers say the company was paid $511 million in credits and another $500 million was pending, but was stopped after the government discovered the alleged fraud. The more I read about the story, the more I'm just kind of mystified at how many facets this has, because surely this is not the first cult that is taking advantage of the government. Like, we all have heard of Scientology, haven't we? So that's not surprising. What is surprising though is when you see all these different facets colliding. When she escapes, then other people want to escape, but then the line of communication is cut off. Then she isn't talking to her mom because her mom is brainwashed, probably much like the other people in the cult. And then the cult is also hiding in plain sight, but at the same time, they're not really hiding anymore because they're going to court for $511 million. That's not some kind of low profile case. It's just a lot to process, honestly. One of the most troubling facets, I mean, apart from the controlling nature of choosing someone's life path, the idea that they want all these women to have all these children. Like, I understand they want to populate their cult or whatever. You don't want to have a cult with 2 people because then you'd be a loser cult. But at the same time, it's just creepy to me how the women are seen as kind of machines in order to like create children. Like, 20 children, especially when they're so young and they're forced into marriages with cousins. That in and of itself, with cousins, everyone is too closely related. It makes me feel uncomfortable to really think about it for too long. And also it makes me wonder, you know, what their views on incest really are, because obviously, yeah, if they want her to marry her cousin, they don't see a problem with it. But I'm wondering how they then feel about closer incest, like brother and sister or father and daughter. Because, I mean, I don't know. It doesn't sound like there's that big of a problem with the cousins, so I don't know where they stand on everything else, but that is another aspect of this that is deeply troubling. I'm glad she got out, but I think about all these wives who've had like 20 children each, and I think Mary's dad, if I recall correctly, has over 300 children. 300 children that are directly his. With different wives, yeah, but 300 children. How do you even remember their names at that point? Like, genuinely, I'm not even being like facetious. Like, how do you remember their names at that point? Anyways, guys, I'll link the article down below if you want to read it. Please let me know what you think in the comments down below. Let me know if you'd heard of this or not, because I hadn't heard of this until now, obviously. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you to my patrons as always, and let's get right